As the primary brand of Smithfield Culinary, we take pride in offering a huge array of high-quality pork products. There's really something for everyone, helping you satisfy every crowd, every time. Visit us at smithfieldculinary.com/Smithfield.
Hi, and welcome to Extra Serving, a Nation's Restaurant News podcast. I am your host, Holly Petrie. This week, we're going to be talking about some outliers. During the first half of earnings season, we have an idea of what the industry looks like, and the results are not great. Most companies are seeing positive same-store sales, but in the low single digits, except for Texas Roadhouse and Wingstop. Two brands on very different ends of the spectrum. Both saw higher than average sales growth, with Wingstop seeing over 20% same-store sales growth, which is crazy town. And Texas Roadhouse, it's expected to surpass Olive Garden and Applebee's very soon. Also, we're going to be talking about the new Focus brands, which this week rebranded as GoTo Foods. The new name is based on the company's reputation as the go-to choice in the restaurant industry. The company said this is meant to signal a new stage of growth, which is saying something after the brand's past few years. While signing over 1,000 franchisees last year, executives said they're not done growing the portfolio and could have some acquisitions on mind. Finally, we're going to be talking about the future of technology. Not like that's a big topic or anything. Apple made waves when it introduced the Apple Vision Pro in January, and now some restaurant companies are investing in technology to join in on this trend. Crumbl has already worked on a way to allow customers to order via the headsets. Will this investment in the technology fizzle out for restaurants the same way the metaverse did? This week's guest is Liz Matthews, Chief Food Innovation Officer at Taco Bell. And now it's time to introduce my lovely co-hosts.
I'm Sam Okus, Editor-in-Chief of Nation's Restaurant News.
And I'm Leanne Zinsmeister, Managing Editor of Nation's Restaurant News.
Gee, Sam, you have so much energy today.
Oh, I'm really bringing it. You know, it's a really, it's storming here. Like, it's thunderstorming, which is very odd for February. So it's a very gloomy day. Of course, I am held hostage in my basement still. And so these things just combine to make me feel very pessimistic, Holly.
Yeah, but you have shelves now.
I do have shelves, which need to be decorated. I just have my little drumming guy currently hanging out on the shelf, but I am awaiting mini boxes from Etsy to help me round out my collection.
Yeah, but you look less like a hostage now, so that's always a good thing.
It's a great point. Hostages don't get shelves, as we all know.
No, they do not.
Or possessions or a budget to shop on Etsy, so.
That'd be kind of funny. They'd be a cool hostage.
Oh my God. Okay, we've really gone off the rails.
Let's move on. Let's move on.
All right, so I kind of want to skip over the first story. We'll get to earnings in a second, but we were just talking about this on Slack with Joanna and on our team call about GoTo Foods. So I kind of want to get into that first because it was kind of big news. Joanna went to their franchisee convention, learned about the new name change. But I mean, we were talking about this. I don't know how I feel about the new name. I'm just going to say it. I don't know how I feel about it. I don't love it.
Oh, was that a question or was that was a statement? Well, Holly, thank you for registering your opinion on that matter. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It is a name. It is. I guess the problem with the name may be that it's a little generic. GoTo Foods. I mean, okay, what does that mean? But you know, what does yum mean? What does inspire mean? I mean, those are. It's hard to brand a thing. It's hard to come up with a name, particularly in this day and age where there are thousands and thousands and thousands, if not millions, of brands and various trademarks to deal with. So that's a thing. But if we want to talk about what the idea of GoTo Foods is, I think it is pretty interesting because I think this is a very clear signpost of where we are as an industry and what we should probably expect for 2024. Let's just start with this. Focus Brands, now GoTo Foods, has been around, I think, since 2001. And so it predates many of the groups that exist today, particularly Inspire and Restaurant Brands International. By several years, right? So it's been around. It's now the brands in that portfolio have come and gone, but Focus Brands, was one of the, I don't know if the original, but an earlier adopter of this model of if we have one group of brands, we can kind of have this shared service model. But I think it probably recognized that it had fallen behind in terms of what to do with that, right? Like, and Jim Holthauser, the CEO. He said at their events to announce the name, which our colleague Joanna Fantozzi was attending, and you can see her great content at nrn.com. She reported he said on stage, basically Focus Brands was a legal name. and they wanted to have a customer-facing name. And I think that's fascinating because clearly that means they've been learning from Yum and from Inspire and from Restaurant Brands International, which is that, especially Yum, which predates all of these organizations, Yum is a name that customers know. Customers know Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and KFC belong together, that they're sister brands. Even if they don't know the Yum brand, they know that exists, right? Inspire, I think, is getting to that point too. I think a lot of people are more familiar now with the fact that Arby's and Jimmy John's and Sonic and Dunkin' all are kind of, part of a group. It's not just a legal name. It is a customer-facing name, again. And so I think what Focus is trying to say is like, okay, well, let's come up with a brand for this group of concepts that when people think Cinnabon, they also think Auntie Anne's, or they also think McAllister's. They recognize that this is a group that has been specifically curated for a reason. And then if I'm a fan of Cinnabon, I'll maybe be a fan of, Jamba. So that's one thing that they wanted to do. But in addition, I think they probably recognize the incredible opportunity for these brands under one portfolio to not just shared services, but truly to leverage efficiencies on the back end with technology today. We talked about this, I think, a little bit last week. But the idea that if you have all brands in one portfolio using one tech stack, using a certain vendor, that there's a lot of efficiencies there, but also then, of course, with technology, there's a lot of data that you can collect. So anyway, all to say, clearly the team at Focus, now GoTo Foods, recognized that there's a lot more you can do with this model of a group of brands than they probably were doing before. And now they're sort of resetting and saying, okay, let's do that. I have a lot of more thoughts on what this means for the future, but Leanne, you can share your thoughts on this first.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I mean, you said thoughts on the future, and another thing they talked about a lot this week is growth. And with a company like this, with as many brands as they own, there are a lot of different ways to grow a company like this, and I think they're setting themselves up really well to grow in a lot of different ways. A lot of the brands that they own are hyper regional. You won't find a Seattle's Best Coffee in the same town as a Carvel ice cream, or even in the same region. So they have a lot of opportunity here to grow their brands nationally. They've talked about wanting to move each brand into 2 or 3 new states every year, which is a great, steady pace goal. And then maybe taking some of them internationally if they're not already, and having things like shared services set up on the back end is such a big assist for that. And if somebody from the Northeast region can talk to somebody from the Southwest region and get their insight on the market and things like that, this is going to make it a lot easier for these brands to grow. But then GoTo Foods is also talking about growing through acquisitions. They're talking about double or tripling their portfolio even in the next however many years. And something that I thought was interesting is that they're not just looking at snack and sandwich brands, which is kind of what they're known for right now. If you want a snack, if you want a quick bite, a sandwich, a coffee and ice cream, then yeah, these brands are kind of the go-tos for a lot of consumers. But now they're saying, we're good on those. We're going to grow the ones that we have, but we don't need another. I think he said specifically, we don't need another pretzel brand. For example, they've got Auntie Anne's. So they're looking at segments like chicken, like pizza, burgers, and looking for companies that they can acquire, add to their portfolio, and expand in that way as well. So I think it's an exciting future ahead for GoTo Foods.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking about for the future in terms of growth, not only for GoTo Foods, clearly, as you mentioned, Leanne, they very obviously, they stated their intentions, we're going to grow through acquisition. But I just think I think there's going to be, and we might have touched on this a little bit last week, I think there's going to be an arms race in 2024 and beyond that, as inflation cools down, as interest rates go down, investors will come off the sidelines. Capital will become more affordable. The financial markets are going to open up, And that's going to lead to just a lot of growth in general, that, investors will invest in brands, that more franchisees will join the industry, because, wow, you got really loud horns by you, Holly, at your new place. That horn just really wanted to weigh in. I thought the thunderstorms, I keep looking up here because I got, thunderstorms coming out the window. Anyway, but it's going to lead to a general surge in growth because, again, you can it's a lot more affordable to borrow money, and but what that means is that you're going to see, I think, more of these groups acquiring brands, because, again, the shared service model of these portfolios makes so much sense in 2024, when data is powering everything, when technology is powering everything, that it makes so much sense to consolidate all of these operations and technology under one group across multiple brands. And with the financial markets opening up, it's going to make a lot more sense for a GoTo, for Inspire, for Yum, for smaller portfolios to go on a binge, to go, on a spending spree on some concepts out there that are exciting and growing and profitable, so that they can bring them into their portfolio and leverage their operations with that group. And we've already seen a lot of this kind of activity in the early months of 2024. So I don't know. I think this is, again, like I said at the beginning, it's like the signpost of what 2024 is going to look like. Like, there's going to be a lot of activity, and what GoTo Foods is essentially coming out and saying is, hey, we want to be a big player in this. We're one of the original groups that was doing this, and we're rebranding, refreshing, with our intention of moving forward with this model and additional brands as part of it.
I actually think GoTo Foods is going to be successful in a way that other companies that have said that they're looking for acquisitions may not be, because GoTo Foods specifically has, like Leanne was saying, these hyper-regional, smaller chains. And I think those are what's going to be more up for sale this year. I mean, but was it Yum or Inspired? One of them said that they were already planning on an acquisition for this year, like sometime last year. I think it was Yum. That they were already we're going to have an acquisition the next 2 years. We're already planning on it. And that would obviously be a big brand. Whatever one of those companies acquires is going to be huge. There's no question it's going to be a giant deal. But we've already seen, the rumors that Inspire could go public, the rumors that, well, not rumors, Panera is going public at some point. Could be now, could be in 5 years. We don't know. But, we're already seeing a lot of this financial talk. Flynn is talking about majority stake being up for sale. I mean, we had Subway last year, but this year, we're February 22nd, is already skyrocketing in terms of financial rumors and things coming true. But I think GoTo, how do they make their brands all feel like one, the way that we see Yum and Inspire creating this portfolio? How do they craft that? I think it's hard because they're so regional, but also they talked about bringing Annie Ann's last year out of the mall. And that was probably a big part of this moving. I'm sure that was their first step in saying, we want to expand, we want to do this. So let's pull our brands out of the mall. Let's start getting them in more locations. Let's start trying to spread them out into brick and mortar, so they have feet to stand on, and then we could start growing. And I think that was kind of the first step in what this move is doing now. But I don't know. I'm very interested to see how they can make these brands come together. I don't know. I'm curious to see how it's going to work, because I don't know how it's going to happen, but I'm also not an executive at GoTo Foods. So
no, are you not?
Surprisingly not.
I mean, there are a lot of ways to make that happen. One thing that the company is already doing is they've moved to a one gift card system. So if you get a gift card to Cinnabon, you can use it at Jamba, et cetera, which is a step toward, putting it in the consumer's mind that these are the same company. I think there's a lot of potential here for not even necessarily menu collaborations, but serving Cinnabon at, actually, this is something they actually do in my hometown, is they serve Cinnabon at Schlatzky's, so you got to get a sandwich, you get a dessert. Maybe they add the equipment to make Jamba smoothies into a Seattle's Best Coffee. Some of these, the thing about having the focus right now on snacks is that a lot of them go together really well. So I think co-branding is the word I was looking for. Co-branding, or even just moving one brand's products into another brand without the full co-branding, like hoopla. I feel like there is a lot of I feel like there's a lot of potential there, and I think that they're like right on the cusp of like starting to do some of those things. I think it would be very exciting. I mean, I love, going. I mean, we do it all the time in my hometown, like go to Schlotzsky's and then grab a Cinnabon on your way out. Like there's dessert. So there's a lot of potential here, I think, for that kind of thing.
Cinnabon's, I mean, already a leader. I mean, Cinnabon just partnered with Subway. Cinnabon has been available at Burger King,
Wendy's.
And Wendy. I mean, I think
Yeah.
all of them, right? So they have a lot of experience of that. And so, yeah, the snack category, there's a lot of implications, but they've done that already. They didn't need to rebrand as GoTo Foods to do that. But I would guess that as they look for acquisitions, that will make more and more sense. That if they acquire a burger brand, they're going to look into how can this burger brand also sell pretzels and Cinnabons. So, I mean, at least that's what I would do. I think the most interesting thing to watch for all of these groups is if you develop a loyalty app that works at all of them. So if there was a GoTo Foods loyalty app and you can accrue points at McAllister's and spend them at Schlotzsky's, or accrue points at, Cinnabon and spend them at Auntie Anne's, that's the most interesting thing. I think you've seen some of that activity at smaller restaurant groups, like hospitality groups made up of independent restaurants. They have caught on to that. And of course, at that scale, it makes a lot of sense, because if you have 25 restaurants across 8 concepts in a portfolio that's specifically in the Midwest or something, right? Like, there's a more direct relationship with the customer. I'm sure the example here in Columbus, we have Cameron Mitchell, and everybody knows a restaurant is a Cameron Mitchell restaurant. And so, if you tie those together and say, if I, spend a lot of money at this restaurant, it's going to benefit me through a loyalty program at this other restaurant in that portfolio. And I know that they are in that portfolio, right? That's, if you can blow that out to a Yum, Inspire, or GoTo Food size, like I think that would be fascinating. Now there's a whole lot of nuance to that. And of course they have so many franchisees to deal with, and I don't know. There's a lot to figure out. But again, I think the technology and data components of these groups is the most important right now, because those are really driving the bus. And if you can figure out a way to really tie those together with the data across a loyalty program, that's when you really get customers excited about the power of the collective group.
What a good segue from excitement from one thing to excitement for another thing, which is brands that are doing great. People are excited about wings and steak, apparently, which we already kind of knew. But Texas Roadhouse is continuing to sell. People are loving them. We did America's Favorite Chains. Texas Roadhouse is obviously in there. But they also, as Alicia Kelso told us, they're set to overtake Applebee's and Olive Garden sooner than later, within the next 5 years, which is crazy because they're so much younger than them and so much smaller, but that's wild. And then we have Wingstop, which saw 20% same-store sales growth, which is absolutely wild. And they're launching their new proprietary tech stack. And I mean, there's so much to talk about with these two brands. They're totally opposite. But I don't know. What do you guys think about where these go? I guess you could take either brand and kind of go with it.
Yeah, to me, these are interesting case studies to look at side by side, because Texas Roadhouse is very much riding momentum that it's been building for years. Every quarter we sit here and we talk about how wild it is that Texas Roadhouse is doing so well, which is amazing. But it's a conversation we have every quarter, and I don't necessarily know that they did anything different this last quarter. They're just like, they figured out what works. They're still leaning into off-premises dining, which is doing wonders for them, smaller prototypes, and they are just like riding this wave. Now, Wingstop, on the other hand, had a similar momentum going 4 years ago. For a couple years there. And Wingstop has continued to do well over the years, but these numbers from last quarter are like mind-blowing. Our colleague Ron, who covers them, said in Slack, like, oh, Wingstop same-store sales are up more than 20%. And somebody said, what is it, 2020? So, and I think Wingstop is well positioned right now because, as you mentioned, they're about to launch their proprietary tech stack. I believe it's going fully live in April, which means they will own all of their data, first party customer data, which is huge for a restaurant company. So, this is a really good time for Wingstop to be doing really well. I just want to share a funny anecdote that I read randomly in the Detroit Free Press, which is Detroit's local newspaper, about Wingstop is a sponsor of the Detroit Pistons. And they have this promotion where if the Pistons win, you can get, I think, 5 free wings with any Wingstop order. Sam's laughing. I think he knows where this is going. You get 5 free wings with a Wingstop order in Detroit if the Pistons win. And the Pistons, somewhat famously, at the end of last year, this will be new information for Holly, lost 28 games in a row. I think it was 2 straight months of no wins. And then on December 30th, they won a game, and Wingstop sales that night skyrocketed. And that's one of the last days of the quarter. And I'm not saying that one night alone in Detroit saved Wingstop's quarter. But it's a funny story. And that's the kind of marketing story that's really good for a brand, because as the losing streak kept going, Wingstop would get on Twitter and be like, come on, Pistons, people want free wings. And then suddenly they won. And I just thought that was a funny story. And that's the kind of, marketing story that you can't fully facilitate. But just the fact that everyone in Detroit was talking about Wingstop there for a couple days. I don't know, that story made me smile.
Yeah, it's kind of what a smart marketing platform. Now, they probably didn't know the Pistons would be that bad, but yeah, if you want to not have to give away free product but still ride some coattails, find a professional team that's terrible. Yeah, I mean, look, Wingstop. Let's start with them. It's amazing that in 2024 we're talking about them like it's 2020. I mean, CEO Michael Skipworth said this was the best year for Wingstop ever, and that blew my mind because of the numbers they were doing in 2020 and 2021. I mean, they quote unquote won the pandemic. Remember, we used to talk about the winners of the pandemic, and it was Wingstop and Popeyes, and then the pizza brands, and Wingstop was killing it. So to think that in 2023, in a very decidedly post-pandemic year, that they still did that, they have achieved 67%, I believe, digital. The 67% of orders are digital now, and they want to get that number to 100%. And to me, that number is. That work is so indicative of why they have been so successful. I remember in 2019 and 2020, I think were the years when they made this goal of 100% digital orders. And I remember thinking what the heck? You can't, it's not possible. There's going to still be people who want to call in. Well, when you call in, they still have a digital system for processing that order. So they still count that. And at the time, I remember speaking with then CTO Stacy Peterson, and it was, they were around 40% digital orders. And I say all this to say that number is slowly growing, right? So they're at 67% now. Surely within a few years, they're probably going to get to that 100% number. But I just think that's such a great way to look at the success of Wingstop, is that the more they really invest in their digital efforts, they're developing this proprietary tech stack that's going to roll out here soon, the more success they have. I just think they've tapped into this vein with customers for digital ordering that they're just that they can just keep running with, and it does very well for them. Now with Texas Roadhouse, this is like a Chick-fil-A story to me. I'll never forget, it's probably been 10 years now, but I'll never forget when Chick-fil-A surpassed KFC in sales. And it was such a big deal because Chick-fil-A has a fraction of the restaurants as KFC. So Holly, you were saying at the outset of this that we, can expect Texas Roadhouse to surpass Applebee's and Olive Garden, yet it is much smaller. It's because of their remarkable AUVs, right? I think they're doing somewhere around 8 million per restaurant, which coincidentally is what Chick-fil-A is doing as well. But, when you think of a Chick-fil-A or a Texas Roadhouse, it is this very intense brand affinity, this very strong relationship with the customer that I think is really hard to break. I mean, when you build a relationship with your customer, you just lean into that, and you trust that your customers will reward you with their service. And there's no bells and whistles to it, I think, is the other thing, right? Like Chick-fil-A and Texas Roadhouse, they innovate, they do, they go in this new prototype with Texas Roadhouse, their digital kitchen, like they're doing things, but it's not so much customer facing. It's not a lot of whiz bang, like look at us go, look at this LTO, look at this here. It's really just, hey, we're going to do what we do, and we're going to do it really, really well. I mean, Texas Roadhouse, for crying out loud, won't do delivery, and yet their off-premises business is still growing. So they're not having to do some of these other kind of marketing campaigns that other brands have to do to get people in the restaurants, because they just have such a solid base of customers who rely on them regularly, and that is enough. So just really, I guess, not letting the customer down and doing what they do very well has led to this kind of business. It's hard to recreate that, because that's something you build over time. Chick-fil-A and Texas Roadhouse have built these relationships over decades. And but I think still worthwhile for other operators to learn, like, you don't have to do some fancy marketing campaign to get customers in the door. You just have to do your thing very well over and over and over and over.
Well, and Texas Roadhouse said that they're growing their Jaggers concept slowly, but they're still growing it, which is, according to Alicia, the best chicken she's ever had. So I think that could be a really great concept for them. It's a fast casual, I think it could be a great concept for them to grow. But Wingstop, those digital sales are some of the highest, if not the highest in the industry. 67% is well above average in the restaurant industry in terms of digital sales. And I think I went to Wingstop once and I did not order digitally, but it was also late at night and it was 2 minutes before they closed, so I couldn't order digitally. I tried, but I think that wings are just so popular. Everybody loves wings no matter what. And Wingstop is the biggest wing company that is everywhere. Do you not like wings, Sam?
No, I do. Well, and I was going to yes and what you were saying, which is, so I had an interesting conversation recently. I won't say who it was with, just because of what this conversation was about. But I think it is relevant here, and I won't try not to go on too much of a tangent. But this person participates in a category where they felt quality was very important. And yet they have a competitor that is growing very quickly. And this leader believes that the quality of the product at that competitor is pretty bad. Now, I have not had the food of that competitor, so I could not validate that opinion. But it got us into talking about how once upon a time, quality of food was such a main calling card. And don't get me wrong, it's still important to have good food, right? But what we were talking about in this conversation was how much more important convenience has become. That part of the value equation, an increasingly large part of the value equation for customers is convenience and accessibility. And this person and I were also talking about the fact that he felt his food at his restaurant was not, or that it was too cheap. He thought he could increase prices. And so that led us into talking about, the fact that even the prices customers pay, the expectations have changed, because for so many of the people who are ordering via third-party marketplaces in particular, if you order $15 worth of food, you're growing more and more accustomed to spending $22, $23 total because of the fees and delivery and all of that stuff. So I guess where I'm bringing this around to is, I'm not calling into question the quality of anybody's food here, but mostly just to say the brands that continue to really thrive, it's not because they've got the best food. It's because they are more accessible and more convenient and perhaps more reliable than some of their competitors. And that might mean something more to a lot of people today than I like their food better. I don't know. Maybe that resonates with you guys too, but how often are you thinking, well, I'll just say, I'll use an anecdote from my personal life. On Valentine's Day, my wife Katie and I put the kids down and we're like, let's get a nice meal to pick up and have at home after the kids are down. Because so many of our meals, as you can imagine today, we just chaos, right? So we looked for some restaurants I was looking on my phone for restaurants, And I passed over 3 restaurants that looked good because I couldn't order from my phone. And look, I'm lazy. I get it. But, it's 8 o'clock. Kids are down. We're starving at this point, right? And I don't want to talk to a human being. And frankly, I don't want to get off my couch. And this is a very real experience, I think, for more and more of us, which is, I'm going to look for the restaurant that has mobile ordering. And I honestly don't care what I'm going to spend for it, because just the mood I'm in right now requires that this is delivered and that it's done very easily from my phone. And I don't have to get my wallet because I can do Apple Pay, right? So this did become a tangent, and I apologize for that. But I think the point I'm trying to make here is that Wingstop and its digital ordering, the success it's had with digital ordering, is just total proof of this. And again, it's not calling into question Wingstop's quality. I just don't think Wingstop is always out here saying, we've got the best wings. We've got the best wings. They're out here saying, we are so easy to get. And, you have to press 3 buttons on your phone and you're going to have wings at your doorstep in the next half hour. And that's enough. That resonates with more customers today, right? So I find all of this very fascinating, because I just feel like, again, I just don't think quality is driving the bus as much as it used to.
And I will say, if you want to hear Sam tell that Valentine's story again, you can listen to his episode of Takeaway for this week, which comes out on Thursday.
Oh, Holly, you're listening to the story.
Which comes out on Thursday. This comes out on Friday. But if you want to hear it again, he talks about it on his Chop 5 podcast on Takeaway. So please listen to that if you want to hear the Valentine's Day story where he can't find food again. Because I've heard it twice within 24 hours.
Clearly, this story is coming up a lot in my conversations.
Is that the best way to promote a podcast? If you want to hear this exact same story another time.
You're right. It's not. Thanks, Holly.
I had just heard you word for word, almost the exact same. It was pretty word for word, Sam.
Well, it's an important anecdote. And look, I'm not trying to project my life over everybody, but as an older millennial, with young children, I live in the suburbs. I'm probably squarely in the demographic of a lot of restaurants. I'm probably not abnormal in this, right?
No, I think you really have a point. And something else that Wingstop has going for it is that wings are a food that people tend to get and share with friends. You order wings for the Super Bowl party, or even just on a regular football Sunday. And so, to pull anecdotes from my life, since that's what we're doing today, and please pardon the accidental pun here, but I have my go-to places for every cuisine that I could possibly want. If I want sushi, there is one sushi place that I order from, because I ordered from them once and it was fantastic. And so why would I mess with a good thing? And to Sam's point, I can order them on my phone and it's always delivered quickly. But same thing for tacos, same thing for Thai food. And Wingstop just is that place for most people who order wings. And so what their biggest goal should be to bring in new consumers and become their go-to place for wings, which is what happens when you serve wings at a party and someone says, these are really good. Oh, they're from Wingstop. Well, now that person is going to think of Wingstop the next time they want wings, and it just becomes their default order. So that's definitely, I think, a huge part of it. And then that's another place where having their proprietary tech stack is going to be a huge advantage for them. So it really all ties together.
Well, so it's funny. There's a plane going overhead, so excuse that. But I have gotten my 93-year-old grandmother into Wingstop because there's one right near her. She can call it up, and she loves wings. And I got her to start using Wingstop, and she's obsessed with it. So it really is great for all ages. Wingstop appeals to everyone. Leanne made a face, but wings are for everyone. Babies, adults,
vegetarians.
When I was a vegetarian, all I wanted were wings. And the second I stopped being vegetarian, I chowed down on wings.
Wanting wings does not make Wingstop money. Just for the record. But yes, most people who eat meat like wings. Probably not babies.
I mean, yeah, and I can't even imagine what Wingstop numbers are going to be like post Super Bowl. Even I ate wings. Well, the week before whatever the finals were, the semifinals, I ate wings then. And I don't even know what's happening in football. but I was like, it's a wing day. And so, even if you don't watch football, it's a wing Sunday. And I think that their numbers after the Super Bowl are just going to be insane. And I kind of can't wait to see what their next quarter holds, because there wasn't even like any big holiday over like the last quarter. It wasn't like there was like a big wing day, like Super Bowl's a big wing day. Like September to December, August to December, what big wing day is there, Just like a regular Saturday?
I thought you were just saying there were no holidays in Q4 and I was going to walk away.
Holly, football season happens that quarter, the regular season. But anyway, let's move on.
I didn't know there was a regular season, but yes.
We're getting off track, yeah.
All right, so let's talk about Apple Vision Pro, which, I don't know, do you guys have one?
Yeah, what he said. I watched last summer. I'm a late adopter on Apple products.
All right,
I've abandoned my watch. I used to have an Apple Watch, and then I stopped wearing it one day because I didn't like the band, and then I realized I think I like my life better without that thing.
Oh my God. Oh, so that's why you didn't answer my text yesterday in the middle of the podcast. I thought you had your watch on to see it.
That's a different story, but.
All right. So the Apple Vision Pro came out January 5th. It does things that I'm not really sure. I don't really understand the whole like virtual reality. Kind of freaks me out. Makes me dizzy just thinking about it. But there are some ways that restaurant companies can kind of get involved in this new world. I guess it's kind of a reality. And so Crumbl is investing in it. They've created a way to order food in the Vision Pro. Again, don't really understand the technology. I am a journalist, not a tech anything. But I think it's really interesting because we talked about the metaverse so much. Like we talked about the metaverse to death. Companies were buying rights to their name. People were like Chick-fil-A created a whole like Mooverse, I think they called it. But like the companies went all in on the metaverse and it turned out to be absolutely nothing. And so I wonder what the investment is going to be from restaurants in the Apple Vision Pro, because there's a different precedent that Apple sets when a product comes out. Like the metaverse, yeah, was exciting, but like this is a tangible product and it's being sold and a lot of people have it. And so is that going to make restaurants move towards it quicker than they would normally? What do you guys think?
I'm skeptical of headsets in general, mostly because, I don't know if you guys remember Google Glass of, 12, 13 years ago. Maybe it was way ahead of its time, but it was, really dorky and dumb, and people don't want to. In general, it was a bomb, right? And so we just don't even talk about it very much anymore. Now, that's not to say that these virtual reality and augmented reality headsets aren't the future, and that's what the Vision Pro really is. I believe you. I think you can do both. I'm not totally up on it. I think you can do both virtual reality and this sort of mixed reality, as they say, that it augments what is around you. Look, I would never bet against Apple. They have a track record of creating products that change how we behave as a society. And there is a lot of belief, I think, in the tech community that this Vision Pro is going to be that thing that legitimizes and normalizes these headsets. Now, I still think they're extraordinarily dorky and dumb, and if you look at people wearing them, and so we'll have to get to a point where they are less so for mass adoption. However, it is important that restaurants start thinking about this stuff because, if Apple's getting in this game, they have reason to believe that it will be a mainstream thing in the future. And they have reason to believe that they are the company that can give it that zhuzh that gets it across the line. Of course, Oculus has been around for many years. They make these virtual reality headsets, and they're still fairly niche. But Apple, again, they might really get us to a point where more people are using these, particularly for that mixed reality. Virtual reality, that's video games, and that is more the metaverse, right, that you're talking about, Holly. We were really hot on the metaverse stuff last year because we thought, this makes a ton of sense. It's it's cool. Cryptocurrency was really underlining the whole thing, and we all thought, what could go wrong here? But as we saw, it was just a bubble that popped, at least with cryptocurrency, and the metaverse itself seemed to just sort of crumble alongside it.
Was the metaverse really just last year?
Maybe that was 2 years ago. Things change really quickly, and I think that's also, something to point out with all of this, which is these trends come and go really quickly these days. And so to say something is definitively the future is, I think, not a smart move anymore, because it's really hard to say. But again, restaurants need to understand what's at stake with this augmented reality technology in particular, because it's like when the first iPhones were coming out, the first smartphones, it was, what could we possibly do with this thing, right? And of course, we just got done talking about the importance of digital ordering that would never have been possible without smartphones. And so 10 to 15 years from now, we could be talking about a whole other experience for ordering that was only made possible by these mixed reality headsets. I'm more cautious just because it's definitely, there's a sort of fashion situation that we have to overcome. You can't slide these things in your pocket. So Crumbl, as you point out, Holly, is one of the companies, to my knowledge, the only company so far that's started to play with it. I think if I were a restaurant brand, I would choose not to be on the bleeding edge, but perhaps be on the leading edge, in that I don't want to be the first adopter of this technology, because you're going to do it wrong and nobody's going to use it and we'll probably make fun of it. But someday you can also claim credit for, hey, we were doing this when nobody else was, right? So personally, I would wait a year or two, see how this shakes out. But it's important that restaurants start to look into this and explore it and see what the implications are, because it could be, again, 5, 10, 15 years from now, this is the game. And if you're behind the curve, think about any brands today that don't have digital ordering. I just got done telling a story of how I will not eat at your, restaurant. It's important that you understand at least where this is going.
Here are my thoughts. I know you're just dying to hear them. Apple has made a habit of taking some technology trends that people are skeptical of and turning them into the thing that everybody needs to have. The first cell phone with internet came out in 2001, and most people kind of said, why do I need the internet on my cell phone? I have a computer. And then in 2007, Apple said, here's an iPhone, and everybody said, ooh, gimme. Maybe not that first day, but certainly by the time I got an iPhone in 2012, I felt like the last person on the planet. So in the course of 5 years, it became the go-to. Smartwatches, Garmin's been making them forever, and it was only runners who were using them. That was what they were for. And then Apple said, here's a smartwatch, and same thing. Everybody said, ooh, I want one. And then 5 years later, I got one, and here we are. And so, yes, virtual reality headsets have existed for some years now, and they were kind of, like Sam said, a little nerdy, a little clunky. Not a lot of people had them, but I think if anyone is going to make them a thing, it's going to be Apple. And so I actually do think it would be smart for restaurant companies to get in on the ground floor. When the metaverse, we thought it was the next big thing, a lot of the big companies did get in there. Wendy's is the first example I'm thinking of, but a lot of those big restaurant companies were in it, and I'm a little worried that maybe they will be gun shy with this new virtual reality thing because of the way the metaverse just kind of flopped. They invested, I can only imagine how much, into those metaverse worlds, and they were really cool, but the trend just didn't stick. But I just have a feeling that this one will. So I'm intrigued by Crumbl being the first adopter, because it's not one of, certainly Crumbl is a giant company at this point, but it's not one of the really, really, really big ones that I would normally expect to see jumping on something like this. And I'm eager to see how it goes for Crumbl, and then when the really big players do start getting into it, because I do think this has a lot more potential than the metaverse did. And I also do not plan on acquiring one myself in the near future.
I don't know, based on your timeline, if you're 5 years behind everything, you'll be getting one in 5 years. I could see it.
But I don't know if I would call 5 years the near future. I'm not running out to buy one this year. But I have no doubt that it could very well be in my mid-future.
I think Crumbl is an interesting example of the first one to jump into this. Like, you would think someone like a Wingstop or a Starbucks that are known for their technology would kind of go to this first, or a Wendy's. Like, I think Crumbl is an interesting first option that was the company that jumped into this. I mean, I don't know. By the time that this goes live, you will be able to read an article by Joanna Fantozzi. She's interviewing Crumbl about this, so she'll know more than we do. But like, I think that's interesting that they were the first ones to, I don't know, they're not the ones I associate with kind of leading the charge.
Jason McGowan, the founder, was a tech entrepreneur before Crumbl. So, I think that he's probably just got tech in his blood, and that made sense to try this out. I think we're going to hear from a lot more restaurants that are giving this a shot. Because again, I mean, Apple's going to legitimize the trend. There's a lot of companies that want to be seen as first mover in something, and this is low-hanging fruit as far as let's be a first mover in a thing, and great for them. And I'd love to see them validate using headsets for ordering. But yeah, probably a few years out from this becoming mainstream.
I imagine these headsets, clearly I haven't worn one, but I imagine these headsets are kind of like the glasses in spy movies where like you can see like boxes and like people popping up on the sides and it's like giving you their profiles.
That's
like
what Google Glass was all about. I think that's what they wanted to be.
Right. And I picture it like those spy glasses. Like, that's really cool. If they make them thinner and like less clunky, like that could be a really cool thing.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. But I remember when we had this conversation around Google Glass, the question was, what's stopping you from, like if you've got constant activity in front of your eyes, you're going to run into things while you're walking on the sidewalk. You could get into a car wreck. I mean, there's so much that you have to consider that like the distraction. I don't know. Like I just said, like I got rid of my watch. I didn't want my wrist telling me I had a text message. Now, I can't imagine if I'm sitting there and I get annoyed by the notifications that pop up in my screen while we're talking on this podcast, right? Like I generally turn those off. I'm not, again, probably a great case study in this stuff. But I guess the point is to say, yes, there is real world application, but people will have to accept that this technology is way more immersing yourself into distractions and busyness, and we have to figure out what that looks like. But restaurants are a great example of how this could be useful from a commerce perspective.
Like you think about self-driving cars, which I think are also in the vein of this technology. Like you could program into your glasses, I want to go to Wingstop, and then your car could drive you there and you can just sit and hang out and then arrive at Wingstop and your order's already ready because you've ordered it on your glasses. Like that could be the future. That's really cool. So Sam, you won't have to do anything. You could throw the kids in the car and you just say what you want to your glasses and everything just moves for you. Isn't that the dream?
That's a dream, but self-driving cars, that's a podcast of another day because they're having their own thing. We'll figure that out another day.
All right. Well, I'm going to throw it over to Alicia, who interviewed Liz Matthews, the Chief Food Innovation Officer of Taco Bell. And they have a lot to talk about because, as we talked about last week, Taco Bell just unleashed a new menu to the masses. So also check out our Instagram and TikTok, where we show you all of the new food items in really fun little videos. So they're called unboxings. So look at the NRN unboxing tag on either TikTok or Instagram. And I'm going to turn over to Alicia, but I'm going to thank you guys for joining me.
Thanks, Holly.
Thanks, Holly.
As the primary brand of Smithfield Culinary, we take pride in offering a huge array of high-quality pork products. There's really something for everyone, helping you satisfy every crowd, every time. Visit us at smithfieldculinary.com/Smithfield.